to me from probably roughly 60 people, and phone calls, emails, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, all the messages of some of the things that are happening from a behavior standpoint in our schools, to the point where, the takeaway that I had from it all, that parents didn't feel like they were being represented well from the school. Certain schools didn't feel like they were being represented well from the district. And from a state perspective, we pass laws and we don't necessarily get to see how they're operationalized in some of the schools. There is a kind of a school environment task force that's out there publicly through the state. But with some of the things going on, I don't really think you can I don't know, I'm more of an action guy. Let's try to figure some things out, give people some tangible things that we can work on. So tonight, what I'd really like is one, just outline, hopefully we can all be respectful of other people when they're talking. The last thing I want is people yelling at each other or at others. At the end of the day, I do think everybody has the best intentions, but there are holes that we need to fill in some of these things. And I've seen that in dealing with this. I've read through board policies, district policies, state board policies, and other state laws and policies, and there's definitely some holes with some of these instances that have happened. But more importantly, every child has a constitutional right to get a good public education, right? That's what we know. And so I'm a parent of 3 kids, 2 of them one's in middle school, one's in elementary school. My wife has taught alternative behavior students in middle school all the way to now pre-K, because just like everybody else, workforce challenges, we couldn't get placement for our 3-year-old, so she decided to go work there so that we could get placement for our 3-year-old. My point is, I have seen this very personally, and just personally, I grew up in a really rough background and had to deal with a lot of different things installed, but the main thing that I grew up with was accountability. And I think when you put these measures in place, we have to have a role of accountability at the end of the day, where when we do send our kids into the school, from the minute that they get on the bus to the minute they get home, that they feel safe, you parents feel safe with them being there, and that teachers ultimately feel safe being able to teach. One of the constant things I think I've heard from a lot of teachers nowadays is that they don't feel like they can actually teach because they're just managing. They're managing the classroom. And to me, what makes my wife brilliant is that she's able to be creative and help a kid learn something and make them excited about wanting to go to school. If you're managing the classroom, you certainly can't do that. So those are my ultimate intentions of what this is, and I'm hoping we can come up with some good tangible things. I'm going to just kind of go over some of the policies and things that I've seen that might be some barriers, right, that are there. We do have a member of law enforcement here in case there's any questions for law enforcement. The Department of Justice was invited. They declined to come because of a piece of code, and I will read why, but ultimately why is because in that title it says that a child under the age of 12 cannot be charged with a crime unless it's murder or rape. And so that's ultimately why they declined. That was a state law, that's a state policy, so can that ever be fixed or changed? It absolutely can, right? I think that would be the will of everybody on what that would be added to, what the Department of Justice thinks would need to be added to. Ultimately, I would hope it's your goal and my goal, though, that we're not putting kids through the system. We're trying to find other avenues to keep them out of the system. My grandmom raised me and my 3 cousins. 2 of them were in the system at one point, right? And that's not what you want to enter. That just allows more barriers for when they get in the workforce, and we certainly don't want that. But there are some holes, and we need to figure out from a state perspective, a district perspective, and a school perspective how we can do that, knowing that Delaware, one, right, is a choice state, so there is a local control level to that. But another just background item, I was on the Reading Consortium for about 4.5 years before I pulled myself off, only because they don't tell you how long those things are going to last, right? But one of the things we asked DOE to do at the time was start taking exit interview data from teachers when they leave. And so it was teachers that would leave the state, and there would be teachers that would leave to go to other districts, right? And that's happening now, as you know, your districts are cannibalizing each other to grab talent. But the number one thing of why teachers were leaving at the time was school leadership. And what's kind of elevated was school safety, and the school safety was the teachers not feeling safe at school from some of the students. And I don't know what's in the food, but kids certainly look bigger nowadays than when I was younger, I could say that. And then we go through kind of the board, not the board, the district policy side. I would like to welcome Superintendent Green. He just walked in. And Hugh Brumall's also here, so in the back. There you go. I'm a back of the class guy too, Hugh. Some of the things we need to look at is kind of the system itself. So I looked up some of the definitions and everything, and they're very broad in scope, and I think one of the reasons why you do that, right, is because you want everything to be able to fit within some of those criteria. And then there's the administrative guidelines for consequences, and I think that's what most people have kind of reached out to me about in some capacity, with questions of, once you get to that layer, then what? And then what's kind of the timeline of those things. So with that, I'm going to start opening it up to questions, or comments, because I think it's more important to hear from you, so that way we can get some questions answered or some takeaways that we can do some more homework on. So with that, I will bring the microphone around. Feel free to, there's always one person that wants to be first, right? So, there we go. Let's clap it up for her. There we go. If you don't mind, just say who you are. If you have an affiliation of some sort, try to, I'm not keeping you to 2 minutes, but you know what I'm saying. Try not to take an hour. Here we go.
My name is Mary Remmel. I have grandchildren at North Star Elementary. My grandson is 7 years old and he's autistic. And we have been fighting since November of 2022 for one-on-one services from the district. Now, they go and say they have adult supervision. And the adult supervision just means that there's at least one adult in the room. But he has gotten hurt, he comes home injured, they don't tell us what happened. He lost his glasses at one point, one of the lenses popped out, it shows up 2 months later. And it's just very frustrating that when you're asking for help to keep him safe and then the teacher safe, they get stonewalled and they're told, oh, he doesn't need these services. And we have, finally, after being on the waiting list for 4.5 years, ABA services at home, and they are helping to control his behavior. And like many of the younger students, he lost 2 years at the early years learning program and doesn't even understand personal space and how to react. So it's difficult for me to understand why the district fights you tooth and nail when you've got it documented. Here's the injuries, here's the elopement, here's what's happening, and they constantly tell you. And the first meeting we had after we inquired in November was in January. Didn't get anywhere, and they dropped us down to only an hour for the IEP. Then we ended up having one in April. They dropped us down to an hour. And finally, we're like, this is ridiculous. We went to a nonprofit organization, PIC, to get some help, and we're actually filing an administrative complaint. So, and just to let you know, you're not alone in the child that is causing the injuries or the child who may need the extra help. The district is not giving us the extra help that we need.
Would anyone else like to ask a question or have a comment? Yes.
Thank you so much. So I'm a 4th grade teacher at North Star. It's my 16th year. I've never seen anything like this. My kids get hurt. My staff gets hurt. Wow. And it's awful. I have seen people be attacked. I have seen people as a union rep come to me and say they want to quit. They want to leave North Star because they go home and they can't be there for their family. And I don't know how to fix it. I go to the union. We work so hard with the district that nothing happens. I swear I'm not a crier. And then you see these kids who need so much help. They need help. They're not trying to hurt people, but they are. And I'm sorry for what's happening to your grandson. I'm not even talking about friends that are diagnosed like autism and things like that. That's a whole nother bubble. But we see a lot of mental health issues, and we are not touching them. We're not helping them. We don't have the services in our school. And I think I've heard that at one time maybe we had places they could go temporarily and come back. That doesn't happen. And it takes a year of students and staff being physically and mentally abused for anybody to pay attention. So I don't know how to fix it, but it can't stay like this. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Susan. All right.
Hi there, my name is Diana Graziano Bowden. I am a Red Clay parent, and I'm also a paraprofessional that by choice works with behavioral students in setting B and setting C. I have not worked at North Star. Thank you, parents of North Star, for coming forward and letting your voices be heard. Thank you, Representative Smith, for making this happen tonight. Unfortunately, this has been going on for years, and I'm sorry that it has made its way to your door. If the district has listened to us prior, it wouldn't have made your way. It went to your door. I don't know exactly what your setup is at North Star, but the buildings that I've worked in, I worked in 2 other elementary schools, the buildings that I've worked in, the setting C students, the behavioral students, those with behavior support plans that I work with, they have been sequestered into a room by themselves or with a few other students with adult supervision, a main teacher that I was at Cook Elementary when I did a long-term sum assignment, or and paraprofessionals for each individual student. So I'm not sure of what happens at North Star, but in those situations, that doesn't work either because the staff is the one who's taking the brunt of what is happening. Just on a legal note, just to make sure, any staff that speaks out, we are protected by the Delaware Whistleblower Protection Act. I have a few pages here. So let's make one thing clear. We hear the words inappropriate touching. Let me be exactly clear what that is. It is when someone is touched in the genitals, they are groped in the genitals, grabbed in the genitals, grabbed in the breasts or the buttocks. I have had that done to me multiple times, and so have my colleagues. This has been brought to the attention of our administration. They're extremely supportive. They try their best, but they're always told that their hands are tied by district. I have worked in only 3 years in setting C and setting B. Personally, I have been hit, kicked, things thrown at me, nails dug into my arms, my genitals, my breasts, and my buttocks grabbed and groped. Last year, I had a student have a 3-day vendetta against me. You heard me. He stalked me in the classroom, ready to strike and harm me at any moment. I was removed from the classroom, not the student. I was removed from the classroom for my safety. Let's keep going. My colleagues, they endure the same treatment multiple times over. Plus, I've seen them and heard them get bit, punched, glasses ripped off their faces, toenails ripped out, a concussion, a glucose monitor ripped off an arm. And I have seen rooms and hallways destroyed, classrooms of Gen X children terrorized as they are trying to work. The door is locked. They're on lockdown because there's a student outside the door banging on it to see that they can get back in. This is all by elementary age students, most under the age of 10. But let's keep going. I am here to say this is not normal, this is not okay. It is astounding to me that educators are convinced that this is normal and okay. Some of my colleagues were even too scared to show up tonight. I have been working since the age of 14 during the summers. I started at McDonald's as a drive-through girl. I've been a server at restaurants, some that had bars. I have a bachelor's degree in a whole different field and experience, and I've worked in a few other different industries. And this is the worst that I've seen employees treated. This is the worst that I've seen that clients or clientele can treat employees. And I've worked at McDonald's. This is not normal, and this is not okay. The bottom line, children cannot be sent or expelled to settings D places, to a different school that better suits their needs if parents don't sign off on it. So the parent could say no, the child stays, and the school must accommodate or risk of legal action. As a staff member in training from the district, I have been told the only way a child would be expelled is if I was seriously hurt and laying in a hospital bed. Why are we waiting for this? I've also been told things aren't going to change unless the parents get sued, and so does the district by one of the staff members. Why are we waiting for this? This is not normal, and this is not okay. In my experience, families with lawyers or say they have lawyers, the district gives them whatever they want. In my experience, family who knows someone in a powerful position at district, the district gives them whatever they want. Families can show up and demand their child receive a specific program that is actually offered at another school in our district that is well equipped to serve that child's special needs and their behavior support plan. And because they know someone in power at district, they get whatever they want. This is not normal, and this is not okay. The amount of manpower and time and money and resources dedicated to a few children and families at each of these schools is unexcusable. Policies and laws need to change in order to hold the parents accountable for their children's actions and make district responsible for fixing the situations in the schools. Reopening a setting D with specially trained staff and give the administrators the power to send kids to the setting D schools if they cannot be safe in the gen ed setting. And what's the deal with only 10 suspensions to use for an entire year? I've asked this question many times. Why do special ed kids only have 10 suspensions to use, and my behavioral students are that? Answer given? Because once you get over 10, it's a lot of paperwork and nothing comes of it. District doesn't do anything. Now, I am going to close. I'm going to close with some phrases I use with my behavioral students. Children under 10 years old, it's going to sound a little different saying this to adults, but here we go. Make good choices. If you made better choices, we wouldn't be here right now, would we? This could have been handled internally. My colleagues and I have tried through our unions, mentors, administrations, getting assistance at district trainings and trying to go through HR, and we were silenced at every level, at every turn. Your silence speaks volumes. I'm almost done, don't worry. Remember who you're working for. The district works for all students and families, not just a handful at each school that have lawyers or know someone in power. Here's another phrase. I'm going to give you a moment to get yourself together. This one's a hard one, but I can use. For those in power positions in our district, please check with your friends and family because they are using your good name. And when they do, they tarnish it. And when they do that, they are insinuating and giving us a reason to believe that you are aware that they are name dropping and using your name at IEP meetings to get what they want. And this is an abuse of power. I know you could be a good leader, is another thing I say to my students. District, stand up to parents. Say no. Say no to services that are way outside the scope of our general education school system. Or these general specific schools. It's a public school system. It's for the public. We are not supposed to be creating We have special schools for that. It is time, I know you could be a good leader. It's time for you to lead your staff through this crisis and stop standing behind us. You can do hard things. Stop putting the burden of this situation on the backs of administrators, educators, and students in the gen ed population. You are literally using me as a human shield. The buck stops with you. It doesn't stop with me, and it doesn't stop in the gen ed population. And my friends, please don't get transfixed on the change of principals at North Star, although Principal Martin is going to be excellent, I know. But we're technically really robbing Peter to pay Paul. You're robbing the children of Ellesmere to pay the families of Hokanson. And I got one more. This is my big one that I give my kids all the time. You know why I'm hard on you? Because I believe in you, and I know you can do it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. If anyone else would like to share, I also have some questions, and I would like to give the district the opportunity to come up and either comment on some of those things, but some of the things that I looked up ahead of time and have questions about. One is, the internal bullying policy of the district itself, reporting and investigations, and how we kind of learn more about the reporting, when it does happen, when should it happen, and then the state mandate of the reporting of assaults and other things of that nature. And again, I want to use tonight as an opportunity for us to learn so we can take some action on something here. The one thing that I noticed when I talk to staff or teachers, they know a lot of acronyms and things that, hey, I'm trying to learn up on everything, and even I don't from my wife, right? But I think we need to try to have a good understanding of some of these things. And then also, right, I went to this already, but the constitutional obligation providing a public education, that also goes to victim versus offender. It is an offender-built system, or the way it's built right now, because when I look at some of the policies, recommendation for process to determine appropriate disciplinary action, a formal disciplinary hearing held at the district level. So, one question I have by the superintendent or designee, these hearings are held when a student commits an offense or offenses that may result in expulsion. I would love to know the frequency of those, at what point in this beautiful consequences administrative guidelines chart that might happen, because that's something I want to have a better understanding about, how we know if a formal discipline hearing happens. And then the referral to an alternative education program, a recommendation of a student be placed in a program outside of the school setting. One of the main things I keep hearing about certain instances at North Star, for instance, and I think everybody does want to get asphyxiated on one instance, but it's really led to a lot of stories about way other instances. And I've had, just so you know, I'm a pretty public guy, coach and do a lot of things. I've been pulled over at the baseball field trying to coach about different instances. I went into the school to drop something off and had a teacher grab me and say something. I've had others who were afraid to come tonight or afraid to say anything publicly, and so they want me to say it for them. That is just not a good place to go to work anymore, and they don't want to do it anymore. And for me, teacher education and recruitment is one of my top issues. If we can't keep teachers wanting to do the job, you already don't get paid enough, in my opinion, to deal with what you deal with. That's why kids go to school in the first place, or you probably have more homeschooling of parents, taking more of an engagement strategy on that. But it, when you're there, we need you to teach. So I would kind of like some of the, I guess, if the district would like to come up and talk a little bit, either superintendent or Hugh, and maybe start with the behavior support plan. Help me understand that a little better. Where does that start? It seems like, depending on the consequence, it could start at level 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5, or it can elevate to any one of those middle things. And I think I'd like to understand how that works, because at the end of the day, when I look at all of these things, and I could be wrong, so I want someone to tell me if I'm wrong, but it's something at the school or the district level. I know everyone wants to say the state needs to do this, and if the state needs to pass a law, tell me what law we can pass, And we'll do that. Sure. I don't see it. Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent Green, for being here. Obviously a hostile environment. Thank you.
It's not hostile in the sense that I think we're all here for the same reason, and that's children, right? And the reality of it is that we see children manifesting and displaying behaviors across the board that aren't typically ideal. They aren't the things that we would wish. And the reality of it is North Star is the latest school across Red Clay, across Newcastle County, across the state of Delaware that's been experiencing this. Not to put it on COVID, but COVID has heightened it. We've seen it in areas such as our preschools in terms of students displaying behaviors, the pull, the tug, and typically our resort in terms of a lot of questions that Representative Smith asked, there's a process. Typically students who display behaviors, we have what we call problem-solving teams at our schools that look at discipline, that look at data, that make referrals. The unfortunate thing is if you look at within our state, while our student demographics or population or numbers aren't growing in terms of the student enrollment, the level of need, the units that we're generating is because special education is becoming the bypass by which students are getting those supports within our schools. And within that, that's the process. That's a timeline. It requires parent consent in a lot of regards. If we contact crisis, where we have skilled professionals who work in our schools who are trained to identify a child that's in crisis, the school calls crisis, crisis will not respond unless the child who is in crisis, parent consents. And it doesn't happen. And so then we have this revolving door of trying to provide therapeutic settings within our traditional public schools when we're academic based. We continue to add staff, parents request one-on-ones, but again, that's a process. So when you talk about level 1 to level 5, it depends on the nature of the infraction, display of the behavior, the frequency of the behavior. This isn't an easy fix. That's why I sit on Senate Concurrent Resolution 119, because this isn't, again, an isolated incident or situation for Red Clay. This is something that we're experiencing statewide.
My brain will forget if I don't ask. As a follow-up though, where does that happen in the process? So is it building specific? One of the things that people keep telling me is that North Star specifically doesn't have the adequate services for some of the students. I understand, I'm just trying to get to that. So what schools do, why do they? So for instance, right, the state did do this. I was one of the prime sponsors of this. We passed the mental health unit count formula, right? So schools can be more selective. So if your school environment wants an additional social worker by ratio, you can have that. Clinical psychologist by ratio, you can have that. Does North Star not have the adequate things, or is it go back to the unit count formula itself, foundationally?
Well, a lot of those aren't built into the units. So they're additional staffing, but they're not generated based on units. It's based on, and if you're referencing HB 100, House Bill 100, House Bill 200, House Bill 300, which provides those related service supports. Part of the challenge is there aren't enough supports out there to be able to hire to even put in our schools, to have highly trained individuals or staff. So then the reality of it is that pressure then falls on classroom teachers or support staff or school counselors or contractors in a lot of regards, who then in turn don't necessarily see things through. And in a particular case, we just had a speech language pathologist quit on the spot. And so and there are no therapeutic settings, unfortunately, outside of the school. There used to be places like Terry Center for children who were in crisis to be able to have those environments where they would get that therapeutic support, stabilization, and then potentially transition back to school. I know prior to me coming, the district used to have the intensive learning centers. Those things have been disbanded. Even from a state level, the programmatic codes and things that the district had established have been dismantled. So the whole idea of you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube is one of the challenges that we're thinking through. Again, we have a meeting on Monday for the Senate Concurrent Resolution 119 on school discipline to really start looking at a lot of these things, because a lot of what we're experiencing also developmentally inappropriate for children. One of the things that we've actually had to do as a district, and it may seem simple in theory, but we noticed it in practice where we had to implement structured play back into our kindergarten schedule. Because generally children just don't know how to play. So now it falls back on the school to do these, what I think we were of a generation, and I can say we because I'm a little gray haired now, but where play and socialization were things that children came to school with that foundation, and now that's yet another expectation to place on the teacher. And my granddad would always say, bag in, bag out. He would tell my grandmother, you're gonna bring something in the house, what's coming out? We just continue to add on. And thankfully, I just realized, I guess, the mandatory training hours the state's gonna support to reduce it from 9 to 5 hours for educators, but it gets to a point where we empathize with our educators, because the idea is to create a therapeutic, social-emotional learning environment while also teaching and help them meet the reading and writing and math standards and everything else. And there's a lot of pressure that's being placed on schools.
So do you think we need to change curriculum in general then to add more play-based learning? Because I will just say that's one thing, I've seen that. I totally agree with you. Coming out of COVID, I coached all through COVID, and the kids who were in sports and other things during COVID, they're having a way better time implementing themselves back into the classroom.
Not only that, I recently read a book by Dr. Jonathan Haidt for any parent, staff member I recommended. It's called The Anxious Generation. It really talks about the advent of just really technology and how, and I'll use my daughter for an example, and I'm sure she might be embarrassed, but my daughter's an 8th grader in rec play. And maybe about 3 weeks ago, my oldest daughter is a junior. She drives to school. She drives my 8th grader to school. Well, our youngest, she didn't want to get up. And I'm like, well, she's sick. My wife's a high school educator, so she leaves the house before, everyone else. And my daughter Jada was like, well, no, Dad, I think she says she's tired. And I'm thinking, well, we're the ones that work for a living. What is she tired from? Like, maybe she stayed up later studying. And what she said to me was, I have a hard time focusing in school. And I'm like, well, what does that look like? Well, my mind races. So then we started to really think about, well, why is your mind racing? Are you anxious over tests? No. And what we defaulted to, it's this device. So I gave my daughter the example of, imagine you're being on you're on a treadmill and you're running. Your lungs, you're shot. You're tired. You have no more air in your lungs, but your legs are forced to stay on that treadmill and keep running. And part of that is, developmentally, our children aren't shutting their minds off. There is no healthy play. And so what we're starting to see are behaviors that are being exhibited in schools that are atypical. And again, as a state, and if you generally just look at our overall numbers in terms of population isn't growing, we reached 1,000 residents because retirees are moving into the state, not because folks are having children. But our level and number of units are growing because of the needs that students are displaying, and then we're typically identifying students with special ed services. The other thing we discovered, because the burden that's on our special educators. A lot of teachers who are duly certified in special education are no longer noting that they're special ed certified. We're not discovering that until we do a verification on their credentials, where now we're discovering that they're special ed certified because of the overwhelming pressure that's being placed on special educators because they're going through this pipeline. So this isn't, again, we know we have a lot of work to do. But collectively, and I'm thankful that the community came out. So this isn't a nature of you're going to get retaliated against, or there should be no shame in speaking your truth. And I'm saying that as a leader of the school district. But the reality of it is, when we look at what's happening in our community, when my daily job is really to look at what's happening within the community in terms of community and violence, what students and what children are being exposed to, the trickle-down impact of economy, in terms of what students are being exposed to in their homes and then what manifests in school. And we're starting to see that in schools that traditionally we were thinking, i.e. North Star, are stable environments where families are well off, and now we're to the point now where we're seeing this across the spectrum. And so however we can work together, however we will work together to address this issue, but I will say this, it cannot solely fall on schools. There are too many expectations for schools to be the buy-all, end-all for everyone. And so it's not always, like, there has to be opportunities for us to connect, whether that's play, whether that's expectations, because on the same thing, we get cited, we're disproportionate. Or disproportionality, that's another term, through IDEA, which is the federal regulations around students with disability, that we're too hard on students with disabilities when we go and look to discipline. So then the reaction is, then we have to create additional processes and programs. So the whole 10-day threshold, yeah, you can suspend beyond 10 days, but then you have to look at manifestation of the disability. So now I'm looking at that student said disability, and most often, if it's emotionally disturbed, it's a manifestation of their disability, and then we have to provide that programming within that current education setting. So a lot of what we are boxed in to do is structured around the law.
So when you say that education setting, meaning that school specifically or anywhere within the district?
Well, we're also not saying.
That's my question. That's actually one of my questions. Because, I mean, look, I totally understand everything you're saying, but like reporting, just to go back, like the reporting part I think is like the key. Because one of the questions that a bunch of people that did not come tonight, just looking out real quick. Yes, I know, my son's at a game. The thing that I've noticed is that people, they want to know when is something being reported. So they'll see someone who gets suspended a bunch of times, but they say they reported it. And this does go to the parent-school-teacher relationship too, because I do think that's a huge fracture compared to when I was younger, at least. It used to be more teamwork, and now it's more adversarial. So I do think parents need to take some accountability there too. But one of the things is, this incident happened. Well, how is that documented? How is it reported? How does that then go into the consequences administrative guidelines to the point where you figure out if that kid who's continuously, whether it's the bullying policy or other violent acts, is still in that school environment versus maybe being in another school within the district, or maybe we have to come up with something in code where they can transfer out of district and we make them whole financially in some way, because of the unit, I do understand that they have extra services at that school that are better for that school and that family. And I'll give you an instance. I do know from a workforce shortage standpoint, we don't have enough anything right now, right? I'm actually trying to do a bill right now to put athletic director or athletic trainers in school. Some we don't have enough of those either, so I get that. But at some point, we got to send them into an environment where there are some of those extra people, even if it's inconvenient for that kid and the family, because what we're seeing is, I think the biggest issue is they have that constitutional requirement, but at some point, overall student safety, teacher safety has to go into account with that, and some of this looks procedural, and I think that's something we could fix.
Well, we're also what is called a burden of proof state. So the burden of proof then falls on us as a district, not the said family. So in your instance, other states, the burden would be on the person who's the complainant, the person who's bringing the complaint forward to say, we have to disprove as a district. And then there's state put provisions in place. So there's a lot around IDEA, which is the federal special ed requirements and regulations and laws, as well as state laws. In many instances, there are state put clauses. So if we suspect that a student has a disability, for instance, and we do what is called a PTE, which is an acronym for permission to evaluate, suspecting that a child has a disability, burden of proof falls on the school or on the district in a lot of regards. So again, when you say what's the process or where would we send them, where could we send them? That doesn't mirror a similar school within a district that has the same needs outside of creating a program that was similar to the ILC, where then you're looking at exclusionary or what is deemed exclusionary because you're not promoting inclusive learning environments for students. And I think, again, sitting on Senate Concurrent Resolution of Task Force, which was created by the Senate, to start having those conversations as a state, because again, this just isn't isolated to what we're experiencing in Red Clay. We're seeing this across the board, as well as out-of-school conduct, right? So a lot of what we deal with when we have, DSP here, a lot of students, and this is more so at the middle and high school levels, students' behavior out of school and out-of-school conduct also becomes a burden that's now falling on a lot of schools and school districts. So when you talk administratively, it literally has become, and this is actually my 20th year in administration. I started out as an assistant principal at Bayard Elementary when it was a K-6 school in the Christina School District in 2004. It doesn't end. It literally is a 24/7, 365-day job. Memorial Day weekends aren't Memorial Day weekends because of the unfortunate situation that happened within the city of Wilmington, where an 18-year-old was killed, a 17-year-old was in critical condition, and becomes our process. Well, now we have to fact find to make sure that that threat now doesn't come from the community and into our school after a 4-day weekend or a 3-day weekend. Similarly to when we're talking about children who may be displaying behaviors, especially at the primary years level, not really being connected to understand that sometimes the therapy just isn't for the child, it's also what is that family therapy need? So what is that therapy that, in my understanding, South Carolina may have passed some legislation, I'm researching it right now, or North Carolina, where they're mandating the families to go through that therapy. Because I'm a firm believer, if there's a child in crisis, there's a family in crisis. And we have families that I empathize with that are making real life decisions because of the state of the world. Families that have to work multiple jobs. Another situation is purchase of care. So families that may benefit from things like purchase of care, that have those resources or those supports. That gets cut off at 12. So if I'm looking at trend and looking at what's happening within our community, the older children are getting, and who's engaging as that witching hour. Again, I'm dating myself, but after school specials actually deterred me from doing and getting in a little trouble. Those things don't happen anymore. And so you have older kids who are reinforcing behaviors and younger kids, and we find ourselves in this vicious cycle where the expectation is schools keep society safe, schools keep the community safe, schools provide them with the therapy, schools help them learn how to read, write, do math, schools help them with extracurricular, and so we do have our part. We do. We have our part. We need to own where we fall short. I'm standing before the North Star community and anyone else in Red Clay to say, yes, we need and we will continue to own our part. But part of that too is going back to revisit whether that's a D setting, because again, through classifications, A setting would be the general environment, something that all students benefit from. B setting would be a step down, which would be more of a small group catered type situation. C would be more intensive, which would be more of a self-contained classroom, which was mentioned previously, where students would be in that classroom with a minimum number of students with not only teacher support, but paraeducator support. And when I tell you, it's just not here. I mean, just not, I'm in our schools a lot. And when I see an administrator that has to run down the hallway with a mat, because that's a part of the behavior support plan for this particular student to de-escalate, to then try to regulate themselves to get back into that learning flow. We have a whole host of other students who truly are being traumatized by behaviors or things that they don't traditionally experience, whether that would be in their household or in the school environment.
Yeah, one of the things in the Constitution here, to give the schools and the school district credit is, you're required to do the education piece, but we've thrown everything else into schools, so that isn't the environment. You're just required to do it once the law tells you you have to.
And we also have families who may choose private or other options, and when those instances don't meet their needs, guess where the default falls?
Sure.
The schools. If your 1-year charter agreement is up, guess where students come back? And so there's a lot that I think when we talk about faith, which is the free and appropriate education, if we're legally bound, and there is no skirting around it, there is no shortcutting, there is no trying to foolproof it, rather than the fact that we have to take them as they are and as they come. And I think, generally speaking, we're at a tipping point. We're not just at a tipping point with folks who are taking time out of their day to voice their concerns here.
Yeah, I mean, look, at the end of the day, you can have every policy in place, every reaction in place, but if there's, there's always going to be a few that ruin it for all. And if those few have no respect at all for discipline of any kind, those are the things that we have to have in place. One thing I will say is that I'm glad to hear that you're supportive of, kind of the therapy being mandatory for the family. I would love to do that. So if we could work on that together with the General Assembly, we would need to pass that in the General Assembly. That's something that I would be a big fan of. I do think that would require us to have the families in the schools, which I think is important, because where else would they do the therapy?
But again, I think that's the other thing. We have to look at where there are things within the community.
Yeah, sure. No, I agree. I think the one thing, well, that's where the rubber meets the road, right? And this is where there will be a tug of war. I'm not speaking for the General Assembly, but when you spend that much money on HB 100, HB 200, HB 300, and then you do staff it up, then it's like unless there's a private enterprise that sees the demand and wants to invest, that's where we have to do it, is the unfortunate part.
And I would stand before you and say, I think that's a bigger part of what we as a state have to contend with and look at. How does public education serve as an economic driver? Because that's on the receiving end, that's what we hear. SAT scores are low, achievement's low. Corporations and companies don't want to come to relocate to Delaware because they're looking at public education, right? We're one of a few states that every junior is mandated to take the SAT in the state of Delaware. So every junior in high school is required because that's our state assessment or measure for high school success. I'll look at the opposite ends of the spectrum in Red Clay. We have certain schools where 100% of the students are college bound, they know they're college bound, and we have other schools where we're promoting and pushing what we call career technical ed programs, where the SAT is the furthest from that student's mind, because when they leave school, they go to work and their whole job is to become a high skill position. We are held accountable for that student, first off, through participation for not taking it. That's one ding. And then we're dinged because then that student doesn't, what we call happy clickers, they click through. So there are a lot of things that from a system, and it sounds good because, and the reason why it is that way is because when Common Core came about, and this isn't the data, this is just to give an example, when Common Core came about, we were over testing. And that was the whole opt-out movement. And so the easiest way to do it was to minimize the testing. So everyone agreed, let's just make SAT score the state assessment. And now we're coming back and trying to revisit it to say we penalized ourselves because now our traditional public schools are getting such a bad name because we're comparing them to schools where 100% of the students are college bound. And so similarly, when we're talking about and looking at data, looking at communities, looking at feeder patterns, if there's an uptick in need within the community, if there's looking at jobless rates, if we're looking at the opioid epidemic, if we're looking at all of the things, what we call social drivers of health, and triangulating that data, the school will reflect what's happening in the broader community. And I think generally what we're seeing now, and again, is there's a lot of suffering that's happening in our communities, and unfortunately a lot of that's being manifest through student behavior. So however we need to work together to figure out how to create more therapeutic settings, because sometimes that's what they need. They just need to be regulated because the behaviors are superseding and overshadowing anything that a teacher or a school counselor can actually do. And a lot of that requires that family or familial support to be connected enough to be able to help folks understand that, again, a child in crisis typically is a family crisis.
Yeah, right. Well, one of the issues, right, is while choice is a good thing, sometimes it's like the Cheesecake Factory, you have too much choice. And so then you don't have true community schools anymore, so it's hard to match. I'll give you an example, the LeBron James School in Ohio. I went out with the speaker and a few others to really learn the model. Well, the one thing is they have LeBron James to just personally fund things, right? So that's a hard place to be. We have Elena Deladonna here, so that's good. But one issue that they have is he can then go in and fund certain things for certain programs, but they do job matching for the parents. The parents are a part of all of that because of the need in that community. We don't have that, to your point. But because of so much choice, we're not really able to identify that as well either. Look, I think two things just came out that I really appreciate, two tangible things. One, maybe we do need to look at the mandatory SAT. That's another thing. But my point is that's important, though, because we need to educate kids of this century, right? Yeah, I think that's a good one. That's a good one.
But anyone can make anything to say, at our time, doctors can't prescribe education. That's a lot of what we get, right? You go to someone, they'll tell you your child has X, Y, and Z, and then the expectations for the school.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm on my phone taking notes. I'm not. One other thing, and I'll get to questions, then I'll come back. But the one thing I do want to just talk about and make sure is discussed before we leave is just the formal disciplinary hearing process, because that's one thing everybody keeps bringing up to me. So I want to make sure we get that on the record. So we're in a private school sweatshirt.
I won't be long, thank you. Drew Marshall here. I live in the Autumnwood neighborhood, and just a couple of thoughts and a question. So, I think we are looking at what can the teachers do, what can the district do, the state do, but I would ask, what can the parents do? And I feel like, I look at a lot of the parents in my own neighborhood. We have a lot of kids that run around, they play at our house, and I went through as a kid some different abuses, and so I watch the kids. I go out every time they're playing and watch them. And I don't see the other parents really come out and check on the kids, see where they are once it's time to come in. So I think as parents, we're comfortable. Some of our parents, maybe they didn't even have to work. They didn't have to go to school because they had to work. We came from tough times. We came from times that were very dire, and now we're all of a sudden very comfortable, and things are changing. We're trying to understand what's going on with our kids. I think that parents need to be really accountable. I love the idea for having the parents involved in therapies. I hear a lot of talk about therapy today and different disabilities. I think sometimes as kids are bullies, sometimes they're jerks, sometimes they're mean to each other, and we don't have to diagnose that as something, but rather just raise our standards on these kids. And for us, it's in our neighborhood. I think if the parents need to come together and talk. We are looking to the school to mediate all these conflicts. We're looking as people who live in the neighborhood for the HOA to mediate conflicts. I think we have to be better at just talking to each other, talking to our neighbors, and I firmly believe that all the kids are all of our kids. We have to, tell them, hey, you're not acting right. Hey, step it up. So my challenge to all the parents here tonight would be North Star School, and I have 4 children go through North Star. Wonderful program there, wonderful teachers. Hats off to all of the hard work day in, day out. There's opportunities for parents to go in and read to the children. You can play games with the children. You can go in and take part in certain activities. So I would just say, what are we personally doing to step it up and help our kids? Are we sitting and reading with our kids at night? Are we teaching them a little bit of math? Are we getting out the workbooks? I think we're so apt to hand them an iPad and say hands off and just relax. I think as parents these days we're too relaxed. I think we're too reliant on other people to raise our kids, and now we're seeing disasters unfolding. My daughter was groped at North Star, by a boy. I said I didn't even report it. So one thing I want everyone to think about tonight is there's all these things that have been reported. Think about the things that aren't reported. The people that aren't here tonight because they're afraid. There's a lot of things that happen that we don't hear about because it's just too much effort and conflict to resolve it. So I think if we're seeing this level of abuse and things happening, it's probably a lot worse than we see. I think this is a big wake-up call tonight. And my question for the group here would be, do we have a parent contact list? If my daughter comes home and says, hey, something happened, okay, I can reach out to the school. I'd like to talk to that person's parents. I'd like to resolve these issues between the parents and say, hey, my daughter's saying this, your kid's groping them up with her friends every day. What's going on with that? And apply some community pressure. So I just want to get your thoughts on that.
I would, so agree with a lot of the things you said. Me and my cousins, we were like the movie Four Brothers and you messed with one of us, right? So I totally understand that. One thing you gotta understand with the parent-to-parent conflict too, there was just a story out there where a father went in with his friends and beat up another dad because his daughter kept getting bullied. And nothing would stop, so they beat up the dad. So they would tell him for your daughter to stop beating up your daughter. So you just gotta be a little
Which is
careful.
an extreme, it's like vigilantism, but how could
Yeah,
we?
I would say the one thing I would say is I think every parent should be involved with the PTA, get in relationships with people within the PTA so that they understand and meet each other's families. They see each other in more, less formal settings of the school, so they learn how to have fun with each other. I mean, some of the best times that I've met other families were not even doing things I cared to do, but you end up having fun because of the people that you meet. Just put yourself out there, mainly because your kid is interested or you're interested in your kid. I will say what I see a lot on my end, and I volunteer all the time, and I don't have time. Most of the people in this room volunteer all the time, and they have no time. And the point is, we're generally the only ones that do that, and that's where you got to encourage that one-off to then join you, so on and so forth, like the community tree. I don't know if you have anything about that.
Yeah, but the district didn't even send an email out to any of us parents.
This is not a district meeting. I call this meeting.
The fact that this stuff is going on in North Star, something should have come from North Star and say there's problems in the community, there's going to be a meeting tonight.
No, so I will say it's never going to be the district or school's responsibility to send out when a local representative calls a meeting, but I will say communication is important. And so that's between the school community on that communication.
And I love Representative Smith dearly, but this meeting caught me off guard. So please know that, rearranging some things to even be here this evening, to hear firsthand in terms of what's happening. So again, this is the state reps meeting, we're here, so this does not fall on North Star.
I did this literally as a way for people to be able to come in a non-formal setting to kind of talk about it so that we could come. I then invited the superintendent and other members to say, hey, I want you to feel like you can be represented. This isn't hopefully going to be contentious, but at the same time, I always feel this way, like everybody has a boss. I look at all of you as my boss, right? And if enough people reach out to me about a subject, that's a multiplier effect to me, and need to be heard. Who had the hand? Oh, sure. This is a member of the media.
Dr. Green, good to see you, sir. Mike? Rick Jensen, WDL. I have received a lot of phone calls from people saying, I'm scared to death, I won't go on the air on your show and talk about this, but my God, my kids are scared to go to school. And I want you to know, I want your name and yours, I think your presentation was great. I'm also here to invite parents, if they want to use my show as a platform to talk about this. And I invite you to get in front of that and be on my show and talk about what's going on. Here's my one question, what I don't understand, and I'll hand you the mic. What I don't understand is this. How can it be that like an 8-year-old kid can threaten a teacher with scissors, threaten the kid and say, I'm going to take your head off, and then keep that threat by hitting him in the back of the head with a rock, putting him in the hospital, with stitches, and now apparently may still have neurological problems. And that child, who is a threat and a menace, is still in the school. Please, I don't understand how that can happen. Thank you.
You're welcome. And unfortunately, I can't discuss individual situations. In answer to the questions that you just posed to me, and I think you were aware of that. That's why you probably posed it to me that way. So, but I'll
30,000 foot view, and this kid is scared to death to go to school.
And again, for many of the reasons that I had previously mentioned around things that impact IDEA diagnoses and other things that involve is one of the reasons, again, that I can't go into specific details about specific incidents.
I don't ask you to, it's process. Please, that's what I want to process.
How quickly can you say something that happened? Basically,
So I guess let's just go back to this real quick, and then I'm going to go.
6 to 8 weeks of data collection at least. I have been told.
Hold on, let's just go to this. Let's just go to this.
Sorry, so.
I'm going to come back to you next, okay? I'm trying to moderate, I'm sorry.
The process is
so laborious. Hi, my name is Ann Budashak. I'm a local educator. I'm also a parent. It is weeks to months and months of data collection that legally has to take place. And I have been told by administrators when I have said, so you're just telling me we have to continue to be terrorized for months before a change is made? And the point blank, hard stop answer is yes. Yes.
That's why the laws need to change.
But I do want to say one more thing. I promise I won't hold the mic long. Dr. Green, you said free and appropriate public education. Appropriate is the key word. Thank you, Casey. Appropriate. The inclusion setting is not appropriate for all of our children. I would like to hear, I was not a teacher in the district when Richardson Park's ILC closed, or Mike was, or Central School closed. I have friends who were, I have friends who worked in those schools. I have friends who were devastated by the closure of those schools because they felt confident that their children, their students would fall on their faces in the general education setting. So I would love to hear the justification, and this might be a question for Mr. Brumal, of why those schools were closed when they did, and why we can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
And again, I wasn't here either when the ILCs were disbanded. But generally speaking, when you look at a full inclusion model, and as I indicated, just in terms of appropriation codes, special schools, because they were identified as special schools, a lot of it is a process at the state level, because we even had that conversation knowing that there is a level of need in terms of higher level of services, not necessarily to the extent of where ILC, but we also know, again, that there's a lot of social emotional needs for students who display emotional needs that we don't have spaces outside of the traditional educational settings in the district currently. So again, if we're willing to work with the state to look at where additional therapeutic settings were, but I can't personally speak to what the district was going through the processes when those situations were disbanded.
So just to follow, would that take state action or district action to?
I think it's a combination of everyone. And again, like I said, I serve on the Senate Concurrent Resolution of the Task Force 119, where we are having those conversations.
I'll give you guys the dates as a follow-up. So
Next
out
week.
email, Facebook.
Next meeting is Wednesday. Thank you.
So when the ILCs moved to a more inclusive model, the main driver behind that was our practices were not legal. Students were being identified by disability for placement and not for need. So essentially, depending on your IQ, students were being placed. The central school in and of itself was illegal with how we were placing things. So working with our attorney, the district, and best practices, those programs moved to inclusive. It was around that time also that we did the K-8 program, or Positive Change Academy for students that do have behavioral issues. We have prep programs for grades 8 through 12 as well. Plus we have many students that are served outside of the state. So there are programs for us to go to. Sometimes the process is difficult to get the students into those programs.
When you say illegal, was it illegal at the state or federal level?
It was against IDEA, the federal law.
Federal law, thank you.
Can I ask though, because I am a middle school teacher, what supports, because I'm an autism support teacher in a middle school setting. My job exists because the state passed a law mandating supports on a district level for students of a specific disability classification. However, I also support students who are not just in my classroom all day. We help them develop the skills to end up in a full inclusion setting. I spend a lot of time pushing in to general education settings. I see these students of specific intellectual disabilities who were, told that they could be qualified for services based on that. They are falling through the cracks. Other districts, so the support for other disability classifications is currently left to a district decision. Other districts have behavioral C settings. Red Clay does not. That is a district level decision. State law could be, passed, as it was with autism, to require that level of support from a district level, but it currently isn't. But right now we have the banner of full inclusion, and it was so promising. But we don't have the supports. The supports did not follow the children as promised.
The sun, moon, and stars when we questioned this movement and change.
And inclusion without supports is abandonment. It is abandonment.
I will say, some of the things that if we want to try to do things, the more that we can do on the local level is important. I'm just going to give you the example of that, of how it works then in Dover. Kim Williams and I were we did the school bus camera bill, if you guys are familiar with that. So we did the pilot through Red Clay. We tried to make that a full pilot because everyone kind of liked it and it's been working. We have data to support that across the other school districts, and it got shot down in the education committee. So my point is, when you have a local control state, not everybody wants to be controlled the same way. That's why it is important to do these local changes if we can.
But we're in a teacher shortage.
Oh,
the Capital School District is making provisions to go virtual because teachers will not show up to be abused anymore. I myself made the last minute decision to come here tonight because I talked to the 5th colleague this year, a special educator of 20 plus years, who has decided not to return to school next year. And it is because they verbatim told me they do not feel safe in the middle school hallway. They cannot teach. They are being required to teach. They are held accountable for test scores, but they are not given the supports required to provide an education. You would need an additional person in my school. I can't speak for any other school, but you would need an additional person in each classroom just to document the constant violations of the student code of conduct. It is constant.
And at the elementary level, they're not held accountable to the student code of conduct in many, many, many instances, whether it be special ed or not.
Correct. And I will say, to your point, a lot of our students are classified as, ADHD, so OHI, right? Any impulsive behavior is a manifestation, right? Like it's a catch-22 that we can't, But it all comes back to the appropriateness. We are not providing an appropriate education for these students with disabilities, nor their non-disabled.
Or the other students in the classroom. That I will say, I get that from my son sometimes. He goes, "Yeah, I didn't really learn much today because there was 4 fights that had to be broken up while I was trying to listen." So I do understand that. I'm going to go to this little girl right here first. Sorry, everybody else, but she raised her hand very sweetly.
So hi everyone, and thank you for coming. I'm Madeline Eklund, and I'm a 4th grader at North Star Elementary. I'm going to talk about how the situation from a student's perspective. So I agree that it's not okay. I'm not really here to talk about how the troubled students feel, but how the good students feel. And I just feel like it's not fair that we have to just sit down and just let it all happen, because how the good students and teachers feel, they're just trying to do their job and the students are just trying to learn. But when there's distractions like that, it's hard to learn and it's just not a fair environment. And I just feel like it's not okay that they can't be sent to the places where they can be handled by people who are trained to do that stuff. There needs to be more organizations or schools that can provide that for people who need a little bit more help. And I just think it's not okay that this is happening. And there should be higher expectations, I think, not just for how kids act, because the school district should just take more responsibility for it, and especially the parents, because the parents aren't really doing anything about it. I heard that the kid who got hit with the rock situation at the parents weren't really taking responsibility for it, and because I never heard about the parents doing anything, because I heard they're still here and doing stuff. So I just think it's not okay that this is happening. And I think the solution is that there's more places that can help with the people who need that. Thank you.
Good job. I'm going to get her first because I told her that was very brave of you. you're actually a better public speaker than a lot of my folks that I deal with every day. Yeah, here we go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Daniela Spatelli, and I'm a North Star parent. My background a long time ago was in behavioral intervention in the city of Wilmington school setting at a charter school. I worked in law enforcement, and now I'm working in a legal career. A lot of what Dr. Green has said, there's truth to all of it. There are barriers, but I feel like we're talking about a lot of the big situations when it gets to the point that it's extreme. In my experience, there's a lot that happens before it gets to that point. There are lots of little incidences that, in comparison to that, but which still aren't so little, that are not being communicated, where there's not accountability before it gets to that level. And I have a question for the school district in that whether they've ever contemplated behavioral interventionists and other qualified people in the schools to deal with these, because it's my understanding at North Star that there is no such person to adequately handle these things, and they're scrambling between the vice principal and anyone else who's available to address the smaller needs, which later evolve into the big instances that we all hear about. So I wanted to ask that question to the district about behavioral intervention. But I also wanted to offer an alternative thought, because I've heard a lot about parent accountability and looking to outside resources because the school can't do anything. And as a parent, a super involved one, one with education that I'm very resourceful, I still find that there's barriers as a parent to get my children's needs met, and so much so that it's affected my employment capabilities. I have stepped back to part-time as an attorney, which is a huge thing for me to do personally, after so much work to achieve everything that I've accomplished. I didn't come from an affluent background. I stand here today from a lot of hard work in an immigrant family. But I say all that because we talk about these things, and there's only so much parents can do. I have a daughter with an IEP, I have another without an IEP, so I see both sides of this and the impacts on both. What I have experienced, though, is I have personally offered the school services at no cost to the school, services that doctors have said my daughter needed to serve her disability, to allow her to be successful in the classroom, which benefits everybody, right? I have offered that. It was denied. I provided case law saying that that's a violation of the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, because like a child that needs an inhaler, this is a prescribed therapy for a medical diagnosis that the school recognized. I was told they were aware, not Dr. Green, but other district representatives were aware of the case law, and in the face of that, we're still going to deny it, because if they admitted it, it would be a violation of the FAPE, which you've heard. So I guess all that is to say, it was only after a fight and escalating it further and further and further that I finally was able to provide my daughter what she needed at no cost to the school, taking the resources that we had available to us to provide what not only a benefit to her, but a benefit to all the kids in the school. So that it just challenges and shows the challenges that there's this idea that parents are not involved, parents are not fighting enough. There are parents, and a lot of them here, like me, who are involved, and there's still barriers. And I just think that there needs to be more accountability, transparency, and communication. And these unnecessary hurdles don't need to exist. So I agree, there's a lot of things that are big barriers that the school district faces. And like I said, Dr. Green touches on a lot of them, and I've seen them all in my various experiences in employment. But there are a lot of little things, some of which don't come with a cost, that I think we could do better. And then I wanted to also just circle back to whether behavioral intervention is something that the district has ever contemplated, and if there's resources to do such a thing.
Thank you.
So we do employ and have what we call board certified behavior analysts and folks who go and help and support schools. Again, I think a lot of times those external supports, when you need them, aren't necessarily there. So to outfit all of our schools, because we are a unit-driven state system, so the idea is, how do you provide schools with those supports if you don't generate or earn those units based on student demographic or student needs? So through our Student Support Services Department, we do employ or have board-certified behavior analysts or others who can go in and help what we call the problem-solving teams or other kind of create systems under multi-tier systems of support, which is a major area of growth for us. As a district, it's something that we're focused on to really look at how do we catch students before they escalate or fall through the cracks, so to speak, to be able to address those needs at an earlier stage. And again, clearly, what we're dealing with right now are students who have fell through that crack because of whether that's problem-solving team processes or, gaps in our multi-tiered systems of support, that we are to this point where those behaviors has escalated. And sometimes students just literally go from 0 to 100. Again, in terms of, they're fine, they've been in schools, there could be something that is maybe taking place outside of the school that you're not aware of, that now those behaviors are starting to manifest itself. And then that becomes the process where you're taking that 6 to 8 weeks of data collection to try to align those necessary supports that students need, unfortunately at the expense of the school staff trying to provide those opportunities to look at what we would call least restrictive environment, but more restrictive environments in terms of going from an A to a B to a C setting. And unfortunately, as previously mentioned, there are no D settings. And each district does classify different settings in different ways when you talk about a local control type of process. So, but we do have board certified behavior analysts and folks in the district that can help support building level teams.
I'm gonna go back here because she waited and then go over there. I'm gonna keep working my way around, guys. Go ahead there, Andy. Yeah, sorry.
Hi, my name is Teresa Demon, and I actually have the elementary school kids in Brandywine Springs, not North Star. But I was just wondering if you've reached out to the local hospitals that do have psych behavioral health, like Nemours and Christiana. They have basic professionals that may be reaching out to them and kind of seeing who can coordinate at the schools to help with children with special needs and special education.
I was actually going to raise that as well, since we have the school health centers, wellness centers, and generally they're affiliated with that.
So we're one of the few districts, actually we have 4 elementary school-based wellness centers. We have 2 within the city of Wilmington. We have one at Baltz Elementary, one at Richardson Park Elementary. A lot of that's still consent-based when you offer those services, so it's while you have them, even within the wellness centers. My challenge in working with Christiana Care was to have an opt-out clause. For instance, if you're enrolled in a school and you know that school has a school-based wellness center, a child has access to those services. If a parent wants to decline those services, then let the parent sign an opt-out. But the problem is you have to opt into those services. So then the parents have to sign up for those said services. So again, within 4 of our elementary school-based wellness centers, unless the parents consent, those services in essence can't be provided to them. And so in even working with, a lot of it is also sometimes insurance dependent, in dealing with certain families where certain providers may not take certain insurance coverage that certain families may have. So again, something that willing to work through, willing to discuss, but that has been something that from an elementary standpoint, because we know early intervention, we even have dietitians really looking at the full spectrum of health needs, right? That works within our community-based health centers, because a lot of times behaviors can be triggered by poor diets. And so a lot of it, unfortunately, is still consent-based in terms of families with even in our elementary school-based wellness centers, they have to sign up to participate and receive those set services. But again, something that we'll continue to push for. In my opinion, it should be an opt-out. So if a family registers for that particular elementary school and you know you have a school-based wellness center, therefore you have access to those professionals. And so we do a lot, and a lot gets lost in consent forms and trying to get, so we have drives and I've set up, I use Warner as an example. I want to say, and I'm ballparking this, they may have had maybe 68% or 60% of their student demographic that were, I gave them a challenge. Let's reach a goal. And, you know, they ended up sending them to Guppy Gulch. I don't know where that is, but it was like an incentive for them to increase the participation. And sometimes families, whether it's through communication, generally don't know. A lot of our families, unfortunately, use emergency rooms as their health care. And a lot of times when you have a nurse practitioner who are in those, they can help write prescriptions. So that even limits the time that a family would have to spend outside of school. Montgomery County, Maryland has a program that I researched years ago. It's called Linkages to Learning, where the majority of their elementary schools in Montgomery County, Maryland actually have school-based wellness centers that are situated, and they do not only clinical health, but they do the behavioral health aspect. And what we've actually noticed in looking at our data, trending through our wellness centers, both at the elementary and the high school level, is behavioral health has been actually the largest number of referrals. So the idea of clinical and medical health hasn't been, it's really been the need for behavioral health, which further exacerbates. I have a superintendent-student advisory council, and it was profound. And the young lady from North Star who just made her comment, you know, they say out of the mouth of babes, in terms of the truth. The students realize that the nature of the role and the responsibility of teachers have changed because they see the need amongst their peers. And one of our students at the John Dickinson School, when kind of saying like what's changed for them, and he said he noticed like the classroom teachers have become more counselors and therapists, and that's what they rely on their teachers for. I know that's a long-winded answer, but yeah, part of our push was to have an opt-out clause, especially for families that know you're within a school that has a school-based wellness center. You should be able to just take advantage of resources for those particular services.
With changing from opt-in to opt-out, is that a school board decision or a school Christiana Care decision? Cool. I just wanted to make sure we have that on the record. I'm going to right back here and then I'll keep going. Sorry.
Kind of lost my train of thought. Hi, I'm Jared Theodore. I'm a second grader at North Star. I guess my question is, well, I understand there's protocol and red tape that has to be gone through 6 to 8 weeks, or however long it may take for these situations to be resolved with a kid acting out in class. But I guess I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around how a kid could use a lacrosse stick with a rock in it, throw it at a kid's back of their head, who my daughter happens to be in that same class, and somehow be back in school 4 days later. Like, at what point is it going to be, okay, this kid's threatened to strangle this kid or break his skull. He's also threatened to kill him. He's also hit the kid numerous times. Like, when is the point going to be, okay, maybe this kid just sit on the sidelines for the rest of the year while all this red tape is figured out? Like, would somebody have to be killed for it to be stopped? I just don't understand the protocol and all that.
And so I understand we can't speak about the specific instance, but there's always a gray area. Just talk about, in general though, when do you go to appropriate disciplinary action with a formal disciplinary hearing? So when you go to do all of that, you can do from, 11 consecutive days to the end of the school year. So that's been the main question I've been getting is, if there was a child that did something that he just said, for instance, as an example, why wouldn't that kid just from a community standpoint maybe be held out the rest of school, since that is a possibility? Without even mentioning that though, can you talk through the process of how you get to make the decision of someone coming back into the school environment after an incident, any incident?
As per the handbook, in terms of what a reentry meeting, and again, depending on the infraction, depending on the length of suspension, depending on the individual student need. I mean, there are a whole host of factors. It's not as black and white as we would just say you did X and now we're going to put you on the sideline for the rest of the year.
But this was a multiple incident.
So,
and it happened over and over and over again. And now I understand the school is using resources of a guidance counselor that was hired, that her job is to take care of this one kid the whole entire day instead of spending their time.
And that's not the case, but again, we can't go into specifics.
It is. Okay.
Actually, can I speak on that?
Yeah.
So my name is Chris Vanderslice.
My son goes to North Star Elementary School. So, I mean, I can speak firsthand on what happened. So, my son has been going to North Star. This is his second year. At the beginning of the year, he was coming home with repeated, incidents of, being hit and being punched. And at first, my thought was, okay, this is something you have to deal with on your own. You're second grade and, kind of work these things out. But then it just became over and over again, and we kept hearing the same name over and over again. Then we got a call from the school that another student threatened to break his skull. So we said, okay, we need to figure out what's going on. So we go to the school, talk to the principal, vice principal, the teacher. They were very nice, very cordial, but not a lot was done. Then we kept getting more reports. He was hit with a water bottle to the point where the water bottle was dented. He was kicked, he was punched. Went back to the school again to complain. Still nothing happened. Then we got a report again where he was threatened to kill him. So this other student threatened to kill our son. So we went to the school again to say, hey, what's going on? What are you guys going to do about this? And we don't get a lot of response. Our suggestion was, hey, what about a paraprofessional for this student? Because the student obviously has some problems and he needs some help and he needs some guidance. We were told that there's 7 weeks left of school and we don't have that in the budget. So we're like, well, then you got to do something because this is a problem. That Friday, my son comes home and he was in line getting his book back. He was kicked, he was punched, and the kid threw his book bag to the ground. So of course I got upset. Monday morning, I didn't have time to go to the school to talk to him. In the afternoon, I was sitting down to put an email together, like, hey, you guys need to do something about this. This is ridiculous. Well, I get a call from the school. My son was being rushed to the emergency room in an ambulance. What had happened was they were in gym class with the gym teacher there. The student decided to pick up a rock and a lacrosse stick while my son had his back to him. He took that lacrosse stick and threw a golf-sized or a softball-sized ball rock to the back of his head, knocked him unconscious. Went to the hospital, spent the day in the hospital, got stitches. He was covered in blood. I mean, just everywhere. I saw him coming out of the ambulance in a neck brace. After that incident, that kid, for some reason, the district thought it was a good idea to let that kid stay home for 4 days. My understanding is the kid thought it was a vacation from other folks in the community. Kid comes back after 4 days. My kid had to stay home for 2 because he couldn't physically come back to school. So after 4 days, this kid comes back to school. That's on a Wednesday. Guess what happens on Thursday? He gets sent home for bad behavior. They were going to bring him back, and the plan was to bring him back and have the teacher or the principal, the vice principal, and the nurse check in on this kid from time to time to make sure he wasn't, misbehaving. My response was, you couldn't do that all year long, and now this is your plan. So we pushed a little bit more, and what they did is they brought in an assistant or a teacher, an assistant teacher to watch this kid. This is after we pushed and pushed and pushed. My understanding now that the person that's watching his handler or whatever you call him, I don't believe that it's a paraprofessional. It's actually an assistant teacher. All throughout this process, we've had very, very little interaction with the district, other than when we call and complain. They were not proactive in any way, shape, or form to reach out to us to give us any plan on how they were going to bring our son back and make it a safe environment. They didn't offer any support. We had to go after them and constantly call and constantly complain. The superintendent flat out told me that they would not suspend a 7-year-old. That's exactly what you said, 100%. You told me we do not suspend 7-year-olds.
First off, I said I don't suspend as superintendent. Secondly, I said the charges. So when we're talking specific, it was why wasn't he charged with a crime? And that's where
I did actually file a police report, and he had a civil citation filed after, which is according to the law of the state of Delaware.
I said that we don't suspend
I asked you what would have to happen for him to be expelled. and you flat out said that you do not suspend, you do not expel 7-year-olds. They were the words that came out of your mouth.
Well, what can I add is it's 6 to 8 weeks of data, but my emails date back to 8 weeks. How come these kids are on the end of year field trip with my son? An optional end of year field trip. How is that possible? There's 2 days of field trip. I asked for this child to go on a separate day with my son, and they couldn't accommodate that. That's inclusion.
Without support. Without support.
Without support. So I think the big question.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting, but I was on that field trip. That Kara is Owen's mom, my ex-wife. I was one of the chaperones on that field trip. The reason I went on that field trip is because they wouldn't send this other child the second day when they had it. They originally told us they were going to send them the second day, and then they backed out. And you know, the superintendent was on this. So I was on that field trip, and they assured me that they would be separated. They assured me there's no way they would be in contact with each other. I have pictures of eating lunch here. The other kid is right over here. They were in line, getting off the bus, and my son goes, "Oh, look, there he is. He's right there." The paraprofessional was like this the whole time. And I use paraprofessionals. I don't know if he was a substitute teacher or a paraprofessional, but he wasn't paying attention. So to say that you guys are, I understand resources are stretched, but there's some things that I feel like are a little bit of just out of respect and common sense to be able to help out in this situation. This kid has a long track record, and he genuinely needs help. And I think this is where the state, the school district should step up and give this kid the assistance that he needs. So this young lady over here that was so brave to speak up can be in class and not fear and worry about other kids that are in that class.
I'm going to go, she's been patiently waiting, so I'm going to go next. But, you know, the one thing that I've gotten a lot of feedback on, page like 43 to 57 of the district handbook around behavior is it's really too complicated in how they're then going to measure a plan to do something with any child. This specific incident aside, because I think you have to look at it holistically of everything. But one of the things somebody suggested, and I'm going to solicit feedback at another point about this, is, you know, whether it's the school board or the district itself, how do you then change it to make, if it is a specific incident that clearly has a different sniff test to it, let's just say that, right? More common sense, trying to be politically correct, has a different test to it. How do you measure that a little differently than you would the other behaviors that are outlined in the definitions? All the definitions are listed in there. If you haven't gone there first, you should go there before formulating opinion. The other reason why I say that is because that is what the policies are and how they're defined. And so I would go there first. But that's one thing to take a look at, because there's a ton of definitions. There's clearly plans where you would start at different phases with all of those definitions in different incidences. When you do have to measure that over weeks and things, that does get a little more complicated versus if you just go to Little League and they end up on the same team and then you figure that out with the board and it's done, right? So they are held to a standard of state law and federal law, so that those are different things that they have to take into account. But those are more policy things that we can talk about too.
Hi, my name is Joyce. I'm a cook parent, so I did not realize what was going on at North Star, that this was going to be the flavor of the day, but I wanted to kind of hear what everybody was talking about, but a couple of things that just to put on your radar, Mike, and things that I've heard and that I've experienced as a parent as well. We recently went through an IEP eligibility for my oldest son, who's in 2nd grade, and one of the things that I found to be very difficult is the fact that teachers are not allowed to help the parents, coach the parents through what they're kind of seeing in the classroom. As a millennial parent, I'm very aware of language and inclusion and open to therapy, and understand that I am not always the best person to help my son with anxiety and things like that, and look to others to help me with that, whether it's counselors or teachers, and not to do the work for me, but to help guide where those experts may be. And every time I try to ask teachers about, you know, what are you seeing in the classroom, they were like, well, we can't really tell you like what we think you should ask evaluations for, kinds of thing. And it took 2 years and a lot of very pointed parent-teacher conferences before we were able to realize that we were allowed to go to the school and ask for educational evaluations. And now we have a a plan going forward to help my son with supposed ADHD, and hopefully it doesn't get into anything. It hurts a little bit to hear things about students being pulled out of school or not being in a regular general classroom setting. And I don't think it's going to get that bad, but it's very emotional to hear that when you just recently went through a period where your student is now being labeled as that type of student. But so that's one thing I would say is if there's anything that we can do to allow the communication between students and teachers and parents to be a little bit more open. I know that not all parents think the same way that my husband and I do, and that we are descendants of parents that were definitely not open to hearing that their kids are a little bit different or need supports, but we are, and it would be nice if we were able to have more open conversations with administration or teachers about what we're seeing. We see things at home and we can't clarify that it's also happening at school because that's not a conversation that's always allowed to happen on that open of a level. And again, not coming from a place of you have to do all the work and fix this for me, but just I want to be able to have an open, candid conversation about what we're allowed to do, what we're allowed to ask for, suggestions. I want suggestions from teachers and guidance counselors because you know those things better than I do. I don't understand psychoeducational background of every possible outcome from a student, and it was very hard for us to get that type of information. The other point that I want to make, just to go back to the parent that talked about community, is that my husband and I are both from really crummy public school education, and we went to college and have bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. We live in a very nice area of Hockessin that we can afford, and we moved there purposely because we wanted to provide our students with public education in a community school that we thought was a good place to go. And we know that we have privilege and affluence to do that, to make that choice to send them to a specific community school, but that was what we did. And now we don't see that beyond elementary school, and it's scary. We don't know parents that are going to be in our kids' supposed middle school. Our high school has been obliterated to no students going to it anymore, and that was the big part of us literally fighting our real estate agent over being in a specific area, was because this was our feeder pattern. These are the schools we were going to go to, and the choice program really takes away from the ability to build that community and to know that your neighbors are your schoolmates' parents, and so on and so forth. So I would love to build community with my neighbors and the parents of other children, but that's not a guarantee in your neighborhood or even in your town. So just that.
I'm also a geriatric millennial, so I'm gonna go over here. I'm gonna tell you guys why this is so important to me too, real quick, just so you understand where I'm coming from. Therapy was very taboo when I was coming up through school. I'm only 39, but it was still pretty new at the time. Within an 18-month period, my aunt committed suicide, and me and my cousins found her after school. 6 months later, I found my mother dead on the couch. And then 6 months after that, we found my grandfather lying dead when we came home. And that wasn't the worst of it. After that, my uncle moved home to help us, to help raise me and my cousins. My grandmother got stuck with a 16-year-old, a 13-year-old, and a 10-year-old after all that happened, okay? So if there was ever a saint, she was it. But he was involved in deep drug addiction, deep alcoholism. So the worst things that happened to me were drug dealers figuring out where we lived, pistol whipping me in front of my grandmother, beating me senseless till I'm in the hospital, shooting a gun off, but luckily it wasn't loaded. Things that should mentally traumatize a human being for the rest of their life. I would never let it do that because I figured out a different way. I use exercise as a way of my mental health. I just find if you do something hard each day, you somehow get yourself in a better mental position. Other people do need more therapeutic settings with their family members and others, so I'm glad to hear the superintendent would like to do that. But this is very personal, and it's going to be really personal for all of these kids, because I never had to deal with social media. You all didn't have to deal with social media. You didn't have to deal with them being on a device at all times. Another thing I'd love to work with the school board members on potentially is maybe we can figure out how to get the school district more money if we have cell phone lockers in every classroom where you have to put your phone away. I have other bills. People thought I was insane for this. I wanted to ban like TikTok in our state, especially in school settings and other places, because if you're following stupidity all the time, your brain's going to go to stupidity all the time, right? My middle son does all sports all the time because that's all he follows all the time, right? And that's where we are. But we are all going to be subjects of our habits and the people that we surround ourselves with. So also, if you do see a troubled child, my wife and I, we took in a friend's son last year where I would literally mentor him 2 times a week. He would come, he would sit around a dinner table, so he knew what it was like to sit around a dinner table with a family, right, with a husband and a wife and other kids, and they learned what it was like to eat as a family without devices, and we did homework, and we played together. And his grades went up, because if you put kids in a different environment, when I was in my environment, when that all happened to me, I did fight or flight. I said, I'm going to find the smartest kid in my class, and I'm going to befriend him, and I'm going to see if he'll invite me over for dinner and let me study with him. And guess what? I ate better. I wasn't in my trailer park anymore. I ate better. I got better grades. I ended up getting Dean's List, honor roll, and everything. But I also had to take accountability for my own self at some point. But we got to get these kids that are having these situations to that point. And if it takes one of us or multiple people being uncomfortable in those environments to help those kids, we're gonna have to do that. When we live in Hockessin, it's easy to be uncomfortable. It's easy to be comfortable, right? I'm not from Hockessin. I just represent Hockessin, and I'm very privileged that I can work so hard that we're able to do that, because I do know what the other side is like, and literally go through my whole life saying I don't want my kids to have to see that. But during COVID, we did send the trailer park where I grew up in, off of the Old Capitol Trail, Murray Manor. We literally worked with Kim Williams. We did a whole food drive, me and my son, my oldest. We went collecting food every day, and we did food distribution out there. And I realized just protection points my mom gave me, right? My mom used to tell me there were zombies walking around the trailer park. I'm like, that means drug addicts. Never really thought about it that way, right? And so you got to show these things, though, to kids. And the one thing I show my son, which people might disagree with how we do this, but I always said I never had a positive male role model in my life except for my coaches, but my uncle showed me a lot of what not to do. So I show him some videos of what not to do, because that's exactly, and we've gotten into it before. I'm like, what? I'm learning with you. Your brothers are going to have a better situation with me than you do, because I'm learning how to be a father too. I learned from a 5'2" woman with a perm. I don't know any better than anybody here, okay? She kicked butt at it. She was great. And honestly, probably a better dad than most dads that I saw, but I still don't know what it meant to like raise a man. And so I'm trying to learn myself. And so I would say one takeaway I want everybody to deal with tonight is just how can we help each of these kids ourselves. Where did she get? Yeah, she did. Here you go, since I'm over here.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm not from North Star, but happy to be here tonight. I'm a parent at Marbrook, and I actually have a question for the district and you as a state representative. Okay, so as you all may or may not know, I hate to end your night like this, but we lost a student at Marbrook earlier this month, tragically walking home from school on an unsafe roadway, and we can call it a freak accident, we can call it whatever we want, but everybody knows that that intersection is dangerous. And so right now the policy says that kids living within a mile, elementary kids living within a mile of their school should walk. And 2 miles, I believe, for secondary, right? So my question is, there is another thing in the policy that says they can be transported if hazardous walking conditions exist and are confirmed by the state. So my question is, what does confirmed by the state mean? Do you know? Because I don't. And also, is Red Clay reviewing bus stops for kids who live on hazardous roads? Because there are still kids walking to Marbrook every day on hazardous roads. So, thanks.
I actually appreciate the transition there a little bit. So I'll start with the state and then hand it over. And I do know, to be fair to the superintendent, he's a parent as well and has to pick up his daughter soon. So I'm going to excuse him in a second. From the state perspective, I'm very aware of that incident. I don't know how they're looking at that. Since I don't represent that area, I don't want to speak for anybody there. But from what I would generally do is first go to DelDOT, right, and say how many traffic studies have gone, how many incidents have taken place there? How is that measured? Why wasn't something done then, right? We would start there. And then from the other enforcement side of things, go to the DSP from that.
What classifies as a hazardous road? Because it's in right place.
Oh yeah, that's not a state definition.
It actually does say confirmed by the state.
Okay.
It is a state policy, and typically the way it works is if there aren't easements, there aren't sidewalks, there aren't crossing guards, so there's a whole factor that goes into adjusting routes within that particular 1 mile or 2 mile radius. And those have to be state approved routes in terms of determining those routes to be hazardous or unsafe. So again, when you have easements, sidewalks, crossing guards, and not disputing any of what the unfortunate tragedy that we're, no, that we're solving. I'm just saying, like, so my prior experience in Brandywine, where I oversaw, transportation, it would be, let's say, inclement weather. Our students having to traverse or walk to school in places where there aren't easements or sidewalks. Are they crossing intersections where there are no crossing guards? We're actually experiencing situations now because crossing guards are established by the county. And if they're at locations where children don't cross, so for those of you maybe familiar with Brandywine Springs, I know we have a Brandywine Springs parent that just mentioned where Falkland and Duncan Road intersect. That crossing guard coming in and out of the church's lot is being removed because they're saying that, students don't cross there. We have Richardson Park, for example. We have to use Banning Park as overflow because, again, the number of car riders and folks that have to pick up. We have principals who now have to stand in, or administrators or staff stand into place to cross because from that standpoint, there have to be state approved routes. They have to determine if they're hazardous to then approve because locally, if we looked at areas that anyone may deem, we're probably looking at an additional 32 buses if we look to bus students within that 1 mile state regulation because those are local runs and you don't get the reimbursement from the state when you look at things like that locally. So there's a state share to it.
I would say too, the one time where I ever get involved with this, and it happens a lot right at the beginning of the school year, and sometimes right now, and actually close to the end because they want it to change for the next year. But I'll meet a lot of people out, actually the very first day after I was first, yeah, he has, multiple times, and Kelly and others from the district, meet on site to see exactly what the safety precaution is. And to their credit, like they try to make adjustments where they can. We're dealing with one right now on Brackenville Road, I think. So I would say get involved on the reactive side of things. That's when we do see it. Good catch. Yeah.
Hi, I'll be really quick. My name is Christy Psalm. I have 2 kids at North Star. And just first, I think that the lady that spoke earlier, I think somebody has to be killed or something before real changes are made because I can't believe that based on some of the things that happened, that changes aren't made. And also, as far as the good kids and Ariel, I can't remember your name right now, but I'm very proud of you for speaking. I can't think of her name, because I was crying when she spoke. My son in 3rd grade, there's some special needs kids, and the problem is whenever they're having a problem, the whole class has to leave, and the kid stays. And it's normal now. I don't I'll ask how was school. Oh, well, we were in so-and-so's classroom, or we sat in the hallway, or we were in extra gym. And I don't understand that. Why can't the child be taken out to another place? That's what,
not a calm down area or
right. That's what I don't understand because
So one thing, Darrell just did have to leave to pick up his daughter. He was gonna jump in here. One thing I'm gonna do, so I'm gonna take a lot of things you said, but also email me afterwards, because when they have that climate meeting on Monday of next week, I'm gonna send it all in. That way they have that all for the public record as well, okay?
There are calm down areas in our schools, and there's crisis response teams that respond, that have been trained to deal with students in that situation. Sometimes intervening with that particular student is dangerous to both parties. So that's why they'll remove the other kids from the classroom to try and keep that student safe. If they had to deal physically with that student, that could cause an issue.
So as a follow-up to this, please email me direct, comments, but also, hey, here's a suggestion, whatever it may be. I'll make sure that's all put on for the public record. We're going to go here, and then move our way back. It said 6 to 8. I'm willing to stay as long as you guys want to be heard, so you just let me know, okay?
My name's Liz Garrett. I am a special education teacher in Red Clay, a special education coordinator in Red Clay. I also have 2 students at North Star. And I think the fact that all of us have shown up tonight is proof that we are not going to have a few folks bring down our school and ruin our school. Since we've come to North Star, I really think this community is a family. And I guess I'm wondering what specific changes we can expect from the district, in regards to North Star and what the steps are moving forward. We've heard a lot of, concerns, but what changes are going to be made? Are there going to be more supports? Supports that were promised to us 10 years ago, that we stood up at the board meeting and protested inclusion. I'm an autism mom, all for inclusion. It's not for everyone, unfortunately. Where are the make good on the promises? And this is where I think we'll do that too. 10 years ago, we were promised the moon and the stars. And we even said, okay, are you planning on hiring more folks? Because I was at Richardson Park Elementary with Mike Matthews. We worked with the Learning Center. That was a wonderful school. And we just thought, how can you promise us this? Mathematically, it didn't make sense. How do you go from having these supports in one building, spreading it out across the district, and don't hire more people? It just didn't make sense. So what changes can we expect? We showed up here tonight. We're not letting the school go to ruin, letting a few folks destroy the school for all of our children. And we're just not going to do it. I don't think any of us are here to take this from you. We're all here tonight demanding change. We're not going to let a few folks ruin our school, terrorize our kids, terrorize our union brothers and sisters, and be treated like this. And I'm sorry, I don't normally get upset, but this is upsetting. It really is upsetting. As a teacher, as a parent, I'm a special needs parent. This is a sin. This is a sin. So I'm sorry, guys.
So, from the state side, I can only speak for me. I can't speak for the General Assembly, but me, I'm happy to be a conduit between teachers, parents, the district, the school board, whoever, so we can come up with actual items that we can then do it. And then who needs to do it, right? The school board, the state, whatever.
I'm going to send a para. I'm going to
Sure.
separate this kid. He should not be at our school.
Sure. So I'm gonna.
This is a disaster. This is a disaster. It's not safe. It's not safe for our kids, and it's not safe for our teachers. If you don't care about kids and teachers, what the hell do you care about?
I agree. Yes.
So what I was going to say is I don't want anybody to walk away from this thinking we want to take all these special ed children and put them somewhere else. When you're a student in my room, you're my family. I tell the kids that at the beginning of every year. These are your new siblings. We are a family. And most years they believe me, which is fantastic. It makes for an easier year. The special ed students are students, and I want them in my classroom. And my autism babies, anybody who is at North Star knows, I love my autism babies. I want them in my room. I try to keep them in my room as much as I can. I drive some of the teachers down the special ed classrooms crazy because I want them all the time. What I want answers for is the students that need help that we can't provide within our school. Those students, where from my experience as a teacher and a parent and a union rep, I want to know how we're going to help those kids because they're not getting what they need. When a student is assaulting classmates, when a student is assaulting teachers, how are we going to help? Because something's wrong. Like, I don't know what it is. That's not my job to know. How are we going to help them? How are we going to provide resources in our classrooms to regular ed students and other special ed students who have been traumatized when they've had to clear a room because someone was attacked? How are we going to support our teachers and keep them safe at work? Because if we're not safe at work, we're going to stop coming. So
How, those three things, we need to support those babies that need it because they're not getting it. Putting them in a room with one adult is not it. It's not healthy. It's making it worse. How are we going to make sure any trauma that comes from these things is dealt with, and how are we going to keep our teachers safe at work? That's, I think, what it boils down to.
Hi, everybody. I am a parent of a North Star first grader, and I feel like this year was really eye-opening for me. My son will come home and tell me all sorts of crazy stories, and outside of Pokemon, when he comes home and tells me about some of the violence or things that are occurring in the classroom, such as like closets getting cleared out for another child's desk, I kind of shirk it off as, oh, my kid's telling a story, right? Come to find out, like, these stories are very much happening. What I would love to see as a parent is just more transparency. I recognize, like, there are disputes that don't include my child, but the reality of the world is there's a lot of whisper down the lane. We all get to find out what happens a million times over, and then it's really hard as a parent to get in front of that and then support your kid and say, hey, this isn't okay. Or say, hey, I understand if you're feeling unsafe, these are the resources that I can give you. That's all that I'm asking for, and I think that that would maybe be a quick fix, maybe.
That was one of the things that I heard was the lack of communication when incidents happen. Is that fair to say to the nurse? Okay. So the one thing I will give my son's school credit for is they almost over-communicate too much. I'm like, who even would have known that happened? You know, but they send text messages, phone calls, everything out every day. It actually is great as a parent because you're like, okay, I can now ask questions on how that maybe changed your day and be a little more engaged in the school in a different way. So I did hear that. I think that's going to have to be more of the leadership side of the school. I don't expect the school district to answer that question. But I agree. I think that's one of the takeaways that a few of us will keep pressing them on is the communication up and down. Better to over-communicate than under-communicate. And then that way, even meetings like this can be even more productive on understanding. So I appreciate that. I'm coming back. I'm going to keep circling this way. Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Representative Ismail. Good evening. My name is Erika Gutierrez. I am a parent of Red Clay. I am also a community leader. And I just want to bring before my point a little bit of perspective. I have a special education kid. My son has ADD. He's the sweetest kid. And he was bullied in public education by non-special education kids. We need to be aware that our regular kids are also very cruel to special education kids. And that is something that we don't think about. So let's think about that because when kids like mine that is smart, beautiful, and kind get attacked, he didn't want to leave. In third grade, he said, Mommy, I shouldn't leave because people is mean to me. I pulled him that moment out of the school. And it broke my heart because I believe in public education. But I also understood the context of the society that we have created. And I said, we need to work on things. And I got involved in, and I've been advocating for education, but I also took a serious role in my kid and protecting his well-being, and I've been navigating him through 6 schools already. There is no public education that can provide him with the protection that he needs from being target of bullying, right? He is in a beautiful model in this Wilmington Sudbury School, where the settings are, my kid is thriving, at peace, believing in humanity again, all right? That's one thing. The other thing is that we need to do something to address the lack of funding for special education kids that cannot be served by the public schools. There are private special education kids like the pilot school that have beautiful programs. In Pennsylvania, if there is a high needs kid, the state covers for the tuition. And then that kid has what they need. The kid has, yes, they get what they need, the kid develops beautifully, and then there are no problems. But we in Delaware, it's just like, I don't know, and I'm gonna be pretty honest and candid and bold, Schools don't want to let go funding to serve those kids, but they don't use the same funding to provide the kids what they need. So we need to fix that. We need to be real. We need to be positive and proactive about that because we are bullying each other for no reason. We just need to understand what is in place and release the funding that is needed for the, make it less. I work with parents, and you have no idea how many parents come to me. I applied to this school, I didn't qualify. And then they have to get an attorney to get money from any district to get funding for special education. Parents are struggling. We are struggling to get our kids the service they need. And then we find doors everywhere. And it's really hard not to be mad. It's really hard not to be angry. But we need to get ourselves together because we are the adults. And we have to be kind to each other to find solutions and support the needs of every kid. Teach all our kids kindness. We need mindfulness in every school. There is research on different schools in different states that works. It helps the teachers, it helps the kids because the teacher needs to learn that for the kids. It calms down the minds of the kids. And guess what? The parents see their kids change. And they're like, oh, the kids learn to tell the parents, don't talk to me like that. It hurts my feelings. And the parents are like, okay. And automatically the parents start behaving differently. So there are different technologies like mindfulness that can assist our families to change for good. We all need mindfulness. We all are angry people. Look at yourself when you're driving and people don't move in front of you. Like, just let's be accountable for all of that. Let's be kind to each other. And let's get together, be accountable, release funding for those kids that really need those special education opportunities, like the pilot school, all the beautiful, they have kayaks for kids. They choose. I went and I tutored the school, and they said, what do you want to do for exercise? Well, you can do kayak, you can do basketball, you can swim, and the kid is beautiful. So if our schools cannot provide that, and we're not getting together, and we struggle in programs that don't work, we're wasting money. So let's just get involved. Please get involved in your schools with the best attitude, with positivity, not with, blaming and condemning. Let's get it together with your best ideas, with your best heart, and let's fix this together. Parent involvement is number one. Thank you.
Thank you. I did just learn about that recently, and it can be a district war too, if you try to go to another program in another district and how the money's supposed to follow, but it may not. Great suggestion, so I'll try to bring that up to a few colleagues, especially Representative Williams. She's awesome, and I think she would love to talk more about that. Also, be careful, she's going to be watching all of you at the parking lot tonight. Yeah. Let's be kind, yes.
I know I've already spoken a lot tonight, but I keep on hearing points brought up from parents. And I am a parent of a 4-year-old who will attend North Star in 1 year from now. So this is really, really close to home. I'm also a special educator of 11 years. I currently work in a Red Clay autism support classroom, and I have for the past 7 years. I've always worked with students with special education. They have my heart, they have my support, but we are in the midst of a structural crisis, and I've heard a lot of people ask about things like funding for support paraprofessionals. The entire IEP team could come to the table and say, we all agree that this student needs designated paraprofessional support. And there is one person at district level who can come back and say, no, they don't. Who doesn't even know this child. Doesn't even look at them.
Do they ever come into the school to do that? I'm trying to learn here. So
I could go all day because I have, in my field, I have fought for the needs of these kids we are being required to service. You would be surprised how many students with autism also have comorbid emotional disability that is not serviced. These students clearly need help. The parents are begging for it, the teachers are begging for it, the principals at the school are begging for it. But there is one person at the district office, you have to fill out like a 25-page packet full of data that you collect over your 8 weeks and send it up the chain to a person that says, all 15 of you are wrong. I, from over here in my office, am denying the IEP team's request for support. So the way that these supports are provided doesn't seem to be legal to me. It doesn't make sense, and I question the legality, to be honest.
And then I'm gonna go back here.
Well, I'm happy to,
When this person makes this decision, is she citing district policy, he or she, doesn't matter? Is the individual citing district policy, state law, or federal law? Because I'm interested in what can be changed.
Can you tell us what that acronym means?
God, what is the GPS? It's a packet. It's basically a paraprofessional application, is what it
I want you
is.
to know what tiers of MTSS that you're filling
All
out.
of the interventions you've done, all the 8 weeks of data you've collected, and so they send that back to you, and they basically tell you haven't done enough. You need to do more. And it's an entire IEP team convening, saying that this student is drowning. We are drowning trying to support them. You can't have support.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I skipped her. I'm sorry. That's my fault.
My name is Martha Karam, and my background is an educator in opening up childcare centers and licensing them over the years. Then I got to the point where I want to work for the state. So I did Division of Aging and Adults with Physical Disabilities for 4 years, and I saw that I wasn't moving up. I went to Child Protective. So I saw everything. And in terms of the children with mental health issues, there's a lot out there. Oh my gosh. And they were acting out. And yes, as a family crisis therapist, I face things at the child abuse hotline on the weekends and holidays. Parents call in and say, I don't want this kid anymore. Oh my gosh. And then they go into foster care. Now I won't even go there. That is broken. But this is sad, and my children are grown, but I take an interest in this. I'm 65, but I have a niece who's in Brandywine, who's going on 13, and a nephew who's graduating. We have a big party on Sunday. But this, it's a system that has not changed. I have been following it for a very long time. And no, my children were not special needs, but I saw it in the schools, in the younger ages. So you've got a lot of state agencies, community mental health, child mental health, all this. What are they doing right now? Are they getting involved?
Oh, they're strapped too.
I know.
Yeah.
Where is
and
the
that's
money?
not an excuse, but you
No.
want to talk about a department that's fighting right now, it's the Division of Family Services. Yeah, so I mean,
I know.
they're making exceptions that I can't even believe they're making exceptions to replacement because they don't know where to put these kids that are coming in.
Absolutely. I still have someone who is involved, and we talk every day, so I get the know. And I know about these children who are just suffering. And yes, those acting out, maybe they are hungry, maybe they are being abused. We got a lot of alcoholic parents out there, grandparents, a lot of the drugs are out there. And I'm in an apartment complex for the last 5.5 years. Those kids come to me. They have something to say. They come to me. They know I'm cool. But I'm at 65, I still reach out. You're doing a good job.
You are cool. You are cool.
And I talked to Rick earlier.
I mean, so one of the takeaways was too with the wellness centers, we need to try to get the hospitals to come to the table and make that an opt-out, right? So that goes to this too.
But it costs money.
Understood. Everything costs money. Trust me. Yes. And yeah, the nature of us when we get a bill, right? If it has a fiscal note, we then have to figure out how to pay for it. I will say one of the biggest issues, and this isn't Republican or Democrat, but this administration, we had all this money for ARPA, all this money, and they sprinkled it around everywhere, where we just created more problems. We didn't solve anything. Yeah, no, my point is we could have put it into like 2 or 3 things and really measured impact. So one of my takeaways too is We do have a gubernatorial candidate here, and I would ask you to talk to him and all the rest of them as well, and say, where will this be a priority? How can we fund it? Right? Because I think it's going to take them working with the General Assembly, because when we get a recommended budget, those are things that are cooked in already, that we weren't told about, that we then have to have buy-in about, learn about. And so, to me, it's me talking to all of them ahead of time, saying, look, this is what we're hearing. Even from saving state money on state contracts or services, we can't fill jobs in the state, but we could cross-train all the employees and invest in technology so they don't have to have all those people doing this, similar things across state agencies. So, there's a ways to do, and Pat signed and introduced herself, but one of the best IT professors in UD history right here.
Hi, I'm Lauren Rose. I taught for Red Clay for a long time. In 2019, I left and I went to another school district. I want to assure you that the problems you're experiencing in Red Clay are being experienced in every school district. It is unfortunate that our neediest children are also the children of our neediest parents. So they are the least equipped to deal with their children's extra special needs. I know every teacher that is working so hard to create safe spaces within their classrooms. We are stretched so thin, and administrators are trying to do their best with us also. HIPAA laws are great, they protect the student, but they also keep us from being able to say, hey, this other child is causing some problems for me. We do need to start holding parents more accountable. It is impossible for us to do our job if parents are not responsible for their children's actions. I had a parent try, during an IEP meeting, I suggested that her child was, doing teacher reports, I said, well, the teachers are reporting that your child is using their hands inappropriately. And this is in a high school. And she said, are you accusing him of being a pedophile? I said, ma'am, no, that's not at all what I'm saying. She goes, you mean he's just horsing around? So that was her definition of him yoking up people by the neck and throwing them over tables. And I said, no, this is a lot more severe. Red Clay and every other school district needs more special schools to cope with the children who are at their worst, because teachers and the other 24 to 28 students are being held hostage by this one child who needs way more than our resources can afford them. We need more positive change schools. We need more, we used to have Central. We need more places. And why is this exploding? Why do we have so many children with special needs? Because there was a time when children with special needs just didn't come to school. Also, what about testing? All this stress about testing? Well, there was a time when we didn't test everybody. So we've added some of these stresses, and it's being fulfilled now with our children. But teachers really have to be heard. And unfortunately, even when they have administrators they like, they feel like they are on their own, on an island, trying to fix everything, and it's hurting people. And we're losing teachers everywhere.
Thank you for sharing. For those of you that mentioned the alternative schools, some that have closed and others, if you wouldn't mind emailing me afterwards, kind of educate me more about that, send me some things. I'd like to kind of dive into that a little bit. But thank you for sharing. My wife says all the time, I'm not a babysitter, stop treating me like one. And that's kind of what's happening.
No, it's okay. Hi, my name is Renee Nichols, and my son goes to North Star. He's in the autism program, and I love every one of my teachers and therapists. They're incredible. What breaks my heart is that the teachers are being put into situations with not a child that needs speech or OT, it's a mental or a behavioral issue. So let's differentiate there, okay? Those children with the behavioral issues are the ones that need the special para or to be removed, okay? I wanna make that clear because there are a lot of wonderful children in the autism program that just need speech or OT, and they're perfectly capable of going in and out of the A setting. And that's where they learn, is through observation and watching their A class peers function properly. Okay, so I just wanted to say that. Two is, and I'm going to ask you and the district, when we have an issue in society, we can put an emergency sort of injunction into place, like a police state, right? Where we can, put in a curfew if there's an issue in Wilmington or something like that, or we can say, okay, all the teenagers need to be home by. Exactly, exactly. So I'm gonna ask, can we look at that type of legislation where if we're having these types of issues, can we circumvent the 8-week, the paperwork, all of that, and say, this is an emergency, we're gonna circumvent that, we need to fix this immediately, or shorten that period for those types of issues? Not done. Okay, hold it. Okay, let's talk about money. We just passed the referendum, right? We have hundreds of millions of dollars coming into Red Clay. Okay. We also have money coming in from Plan B, Part B, through IDEA, okay? And my child is Part B autism, okay? It's like an extra $2,000 per child, okay? Then Red Clay also has ESA money, which is Title I, which is our poor demographics, okay? How, and I've been looking, trust me, how does all of that money fold into our budgets, okay? So for the Part B, if we have a problem child, where does that $2,000 go a year? I cannot for the life of me find it, okay? How does it bubble up to the budget? There's plenty of money in this school district, plenty. We all willingly approved this referendum. Can we look at that budget as an emergency? And I know there's facility things, and I know part of it was for new faculty and raises.
Yeah, not new, which is really
One thing, I'm sorry. Okay, you can correct me, but can we get more paras, not substitutes, because it's a different qualification and different schooling. If we had more paras and we were able to put this emergency injunction in place, the child and the children, the aggressor and everybody else would have been protected this year. And I know we live in Delaware. Everybody knows everybody. These stories are flying around. So let's just pretend that it's not, okay? I don't want my beloved teachers, whether they are current with my son or past, to be put in a situation where they don't feel safe. I look at them as friends. We need emergency legislation today going into next year. So this summer is imperative for these things to happen. One last thing. I just found out, and I hope this is true, that between Cook and North Star, we are getting 3 constables to help with those 2 schools.
It's not specifically just Cook and North Star, 3 additional constables.
Okay.
For elementary.
Okay, so we'll have 3 constables shared between how many schools?
15. Yeah.
Okay, so there's 3 for all of these children in all of these schools. What if there's an emergency and they're across town in Ellesmere and we need them at North Star immediately? So can we look at the budgets for constables? Can we look at the budgets for paras? Can we put the emergency injunction, look at that type of thing? These are all things that I think are doable. Okay, thank you. I just want to give solutions.
No, I appreciate that, thank you. And my kids are in my brain, I'm gonna try to remember that in order. I think the one was the emergency order. So I think the way that could work would be is if we wrote a bill where each school district had the local authority to be able to make that decision. Yeah, so I think that could be something we could work with the supers on, absolutely. Because otherwise, just to be frank, I don't think it would pass if we forced everybody to do it.
It needed to be done back in like
Sure.
September, October, November, and these things would have escalated. These children who have a behavior issue could have gotten better therapies, more targeted therapies, and these children who were harmed would have been harmed possibly. So
understood.
Yeah.
So I'll also bring that up at the meeting on Monday, and because we are not in session this week or next week, just for the record. But we can look into that. The other was the referendum. So the referendum, you voted on two things for the referendum. One was capital, so that's all has to go to buildings and maintenance and all of that, facilities. The other was teacher pay. So I was on the task force for that, where we wanted to make sure the teachers at a starting point had more money and then got incremental as your years of service went on. So that was what went off to say this. It still doesn't even keep up with Maryland or New Jersey, because New Jersey's number one. Yeah, but those were those two things for you voted on.
Also, back in like in September, I met with Sturgeon, Senator Sturgeon,
Sure.
and Representative Williams about teacher shortages. In particular regarding speech. We know that there's teacher shortages nationwide, especially with SLPs. We need to earmark money to, at the very bottom level of enticing people to come into this field as teachers. So they're gonna work with the university. It takes time to change these. University of Delaware doesn't even have like part-time or offline. If you wanna be an SLP, you have to go in person and be a full-time student.
Yeah, so I can speak to that because I've helped with that program as the speaker. I will say though, that is the top program at the university from a graduate perspective to keep students in the state of Delaware. So I will give them credit, and it's because of the placements that they do up and down the state. Where, for instance, we just had two on the floor last week. They're both staying in the state of Delaware. One is coming to Red Clay, actually, and the other has decided that they wanted to be in an older adult facility because they just decided I'd rather work with older adults. They're churning out maximum class sizes every year, and their placement to stay in Delaware is over 70%. So I got to give them credit for that. To your point, though, that's a building that you're building, right? The online part, I'll bring that up, right? That has to be an issue that they have too from the clinical perspective when they go to online. I will say that universities are having the same problem everybody else is. They're having a hard time getting people to want to come and teach that side of it. So you see both sides of it because from the other side, from the paraprofessional side, I think you brought up was the last one. The hard part there is kind of like the situation right now. When we are having such issues already, it's like the paradox of people don't want to do the job.
Whoa. I'd like to see them.
Okay.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Professional, paraprofessional. I can afford to be a paraprofessional.
Yes.
Because I am a dual income household. I took this job for the health benefits because my husband was to start his IT company. We are lucky enough, he's been successful. What I earn pays for our mortgage only for 9 months of the year. If I was a single mother, I could not even live in our school district. I can afford to be a parent. I am a professional, educated woman. I was educated here at University of Delaware. I'm from Jersey. I know how much I get paid here.
Well, thank you for saying.
Only because I married Delaware.
We appreciate that.
Anyway, there are professionals that would love to serve our community. They can't afford to take these jobs. I came to the district with years of experience as a substitute teacher. I got my setting C, when I was a setting C teacher, that was a long-term sub-assignment for 8 months. When I sent my resume and said, I want to be a para, I need health insurance for my family, so my husband started his business again. Every single thing is not counted. Zero. It's as if I came out of, if I was a body off the street, none of my experience counted, they made me start at level 1. That's less than, that's about $32,000 a year. I'm at level 2. Yay, I'm at 35. You can't get professionals to take this. There are very well-trained, educated professionals that would love to serve our community. You can't get them.
You and I did talk about that. My mother-in-law in the same situation. She taught for 30 years in a private school, and then they said, sorry, you're at level 1 and you can be a para.
It's ridiculous. And there's another
But she
thing.
was team teaching with everybody.
In the school that I'm at now, I'm at the elementary school, we have multiple kids that are behavior kids that have parents. Yeah, but the district won't send us enough. We have 3 ESS substitute teachers with behavioral students full-time.
ESS is the subservice.
Yeah, subservice.
Thank you.
They came with no training.
None.
0. They are people that want to be helpful. They want to help the community. Guess what? We go on the side and say, look, I want to tell you what you just got yourself into. Now, oh yeah, that's my art. Yeah, so.
We're talking about money being made the offline conversation to help, what she's saying is that substitute teachers are making more than paraprofessionals.
Yes.
Sorry, just
I bet
adding.
they don't get insurance, so there you go. The other thing,
That is the truth.
we don't get training. As a paraprofessional, I'm sorry, Bruno, the training sucks. I rely on my parenting skills, and that's why I'm able to be successful with my students.
You get applied behavior analysis training, and you have contacts that are.
Yeah, I'm a behavior analyst at the district, and I mean, this is the first year that I'm in I'm the lead for autism for behavior analysts. And
I'm not talking about the autism program, that's
But
what
I
I'm
mean,
saying.
I work for North Star, I know some of the parents and the kids, but we, who are behavior professionals, are not asked to do trainings. I have some principals that will let me speak at their building meetings because we have issues and we have staff that are scared or they're hurt. I wear scrubs every day because I'm in the thick of everything, you know this. You know what I mean? Like, certain schools reach out and say, Shannon, I need you today. North Star, because the child isn't autistic, has a different behavior analyst, but that person's not full-time. So again, we do have people that have been hired. I've been with the district for 5 years. This is the first year I've been a lead, and I go to 14 schools that have autism C support classrooms. I do FBAs for A and B autistic students. So there are changes, they're just not filtering to everyone yet. And it's not falling on deaf ears because we've had meetings and I'm well aware of what's going on at North Star, but it does happen in other schools. There's just not parents talking about it. You guys have a good amount of parents that care and know and that are also teachers in some of my schools. And then I hear about it and then I go, what do you need? So hopefully by the time we have new teacher training and we're back in school, that we are allowed to come and do trainings for people because I've done this for 25 years.
And that would be great, because what we're getting now is nothing that I use in the classroom. I rely on my parenting skills. I was provided 0 training before thrown into a setting C room.
I did want to recognize a few folks. I wanted to specifically say that school board member Jose Matthews wanted to be here tonight. He called me ahead of time. He could not because he had to be at an education meeting in Dover. But I at least wanted to let you know he said to email him with concerns as well. He'd like to hear from you. So I wanted to be fair that he called me and he did say that. We also do have Kathy here.
She wants to say something.
Okay, and real quick, Kathy's here. Susan, the new school board member, is here. Starts in a month. Yep, starts in a month. And Vic is here as well. So we do appreciate you guys being here. And hopefully we can all work together on some of these things.
Hi, my name is Susan. This is my husband Fran. We have 3 kids in Red Clay. One is a graduate, one's a junior, and one is now in middle school, but they went to Linden Hill first and then Cook. And to the parents of the little boy who's hurt, I listened to what you guys so bravely said at the last board meeting, and I was having like serious flashbacks to literally 10 years ago when my son was a 5th grader at Linden Hill, and he was getting bullied. And your story, while more extreme, was our story. There was another little boy who rode his bus, who had his little gang on the bus, and they would pick on him on the bus all the way to school. And then same little boy was in his class with a different little posse that would make fun of him and, tease him and just all manner. And it was just the constant nature of it. Like, he could never get away, right? He can't get away on the bus, he can't get away in the classroom. And there were months of emails. Months, like, starting, I don't know, October. This is what we're